All right, sophomores, nice midterm review. This is about the written portion. I'm scanning to the top. Um, just looking back over some of the main topics we covered. For 2021, we included absolutism. Then we went on to the Enlightenment, the French Revolution, nationalism, industrialism, and imperialism. And if you recall, I thought those three could easily go together depending how you looked at them, right? So absolutism, I called topic 00 because outside of COVID, that usually gets covered in Global 9, but it's all right. We cover it before. The main thing there is just to know about divine right of kings, basically, right? Which will kind of lead to the idea of the Enlightenment, scientific revolution, and then we'll have the French Revolution. But skipping down to the potential writing part, I want to talk about some of the main ideas for the writing. For the essay or for the exam, you're going to have multiple choice section and then 2 of 3 essays. What I mean by that is you are going to be given 3. These are some of the possible ones. You're going to be given 3, and you'll have to write 2 5-paragraph essays. So recall this idea of a 5-paragraph essay. 1 thesis, 3 main points. Those are your body paragraphs, each with 5, right? I like to take my jumbled ideas and make them into a line to make it easier for me to organize, right? 3 body paragraphs. Aim for 5 things inside of each one. Some of you think in a linear way, and maybe you like the flowchart way, right? A thesis and 3 main points. Each of those main points has 5 things off of it. And we talk a lot about that in class, so I'm not going to belabor it. I just wanted to talk about the idea that the topics, right? And again, we covered a great deal of this in class leading into the exam. For the sakes of this essay on the exam, think of these 2 ideas together, right? The idea of revolution and Napoleon Bonaparte, right? French Revolution, Napoleon Bonaparte. He is a impact. He is a effect, a result of the French Revolution, right? What are the causes and impacts, right? One, we talked about those 2 in class. A third way to maybe plan an essay about the French Revolution on changes, right? Plan 3. Do a paragraph about the causes of the French Revolution. Go back to Louis the 14th, right? And the palace at Versailles. Get a little hard right there. The palace at Versailles, which was expensive, right? So what are the causes going back to the French Revolution? You could talk about the Enlightenment. You could talk about absolutism, right? Because Louis the 14th, prime example of an absolute monarch, right? So what are the causes of the French Revolution? What are some of the effects? How does the French Revolution play out? We talked about a middle class, right? Fancy word for the middle class, bourgeoisie. I'm surely spelled that wrong, right? So the bourgeoisie versus the working class, the proletariat, right? The getting rid of the old order of aristocratic rule, right? Which is a leftover feudalism. But again, the French Revolution, the causes, money basically is the key one. Money and the new ideas, looking at the American Revolution, right? These new ideas about how governments should be formed and getting away from the idea of a monarchy, even a constitutional monarchy, which is where a monarch is limited by law. What are the effects of the French Revolution? One of which might be Napoleon. Napoleon is an effect of the French Revolution. He created an empire, right? When he is finally defeated at Waterloo, right? His empire comes apart. The powers in Europe, mostly the conservatives who want to hold on to the old way. They want to conserve the old ways, right? What was the old ways? Feudalism, right? Where the aristocrats have the power. They create the Congress of Vienna, in which they balanced power in Europe. Congress of Vienna, balanced power in Europe. That holds it together for a long time, right? But in the middle of the 1800s, 1848 being a key year, we see nationalism break out. So again, that's why at the top I pointed out nationalism. The causes and such go together, right? And one of the problems with the balance of Europe holds it together. One of the key ruling families in Europe are the Habsburgs, right? Holds it together. But by 1848, nationalism breaks this apart. Austria, Hungary, Serbia, Bosnia, all those places want their own leadership, right? Their own nationalism. So if you're writing about changes as caused by the French Revolution, write a paragraph maybe about the causes of it. What are the effects of the French Revolution? And evaluate whether they worked, right? You might focus on how that did work. It did create a balance of power in Europe. Be able to give positive and negative examples. Give specific examples of that, right? So, right, topics from the other day in class. Describe the details of the French Revolution, the causes, the impact, right? The effect, the impact. Think about this idea of absolutism, especially as it relates to Napoleon Bonaparte. Very important stuff. Politics, we didn't get enough into this quarter. We'll probably cover it a little bit more going into World War One, but it's not unlike the Congress of Vienna. I did talk a great deal about John Locke and Thomas Hobbes, so be able to explain Locke and the ideas of the Enlightenment, right? Maybe they fit into that essay about the French Revolution. And Hobbes, right? He's related to the idea of absolutism. He thought people were nasty and selfish, fighting for limited resources, and they needed an absolute government to be in charge, right? So, two other topics. Industrialism. What are the causes and effects, right? Especially pay attention to the philosophical effects. I believe that was the section 4 of that chapter, right? One of which it talked about realism being one. But probably I spent the most time on romanticism because it is one of my ultimate favorite artistic movements. And I mean artistic in religion, etc., right? Realism is this idea of stark and harsh. That will actually play out more when we get to um, World War One, right? But Romanticism being an important artistic movement, a return to nature and the natural order. Again, it's also a reaction to industrialism, right? Or excuse me, imperialism as well, right? So, what are some of the economic, philosophical, and economic responses, right? One of which to the workers being exploited. Karl Marx writes a book in which he says the two classes of people, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. The bourgeoisies are the capitalists, the people who own the means of production, and the proletariat are the workers, right? He thinks they will clash, and all of history is about their clash. He thinks that a step on the way to the ultimate system of communism is socialism, in which the means of production are owned by the whole society. What he didn't foresee was that unions will form, governments will start to change laws to protect the working class, the proletariat. They will create laws to protect the proletariat. Marx did not really foresee that. Right? Another economic response isn't necessarily the right word because it goes all the way back to the idea of mercantilism in the age of exploration, but capitalism is a response to industrialism. And then we're talking about imperialism. What were the primary social, political, and economic reasons for imperialism, right? And imperialism, describe what an empire is. And we're not necessarily talking about just taking over a place, but we're talking about a larger nation dominating another. And some of that, in terms, is also simply economic imperialism, right? So, social, political, and economic reasons for imperialist demands of European nations. Be aware of all of those. These ideas as I go through the review for the multiple choice section.